All right, you're welcome to this session on the Megas Protocol series for mentoring. And this is Harkheindzel Academy, by the way. And so we're talking today about order. And I remember when I was trying to get the topic for today's session, it was quite difficult to articulate. I first wanted to go with the term balance, but balance did not really agree with the description of what I had in mind. One of the things that would sort of describe it a whole lot better had a bit of a contextual issue. That's the term harmony. Okay. So between choosing balance, choosing harmony, that fine balance, and balance also started to look like a more idealistic thing that it's practically difficult to attain. All right. And so after a bit more of pondering, I think order came in mind. And order kinds of put it in a way that it's a bit more relatable, with people. So we're just going to go with order, okay? In order, I always try to do this so I don't go beyond in tangent of what I have in mind. So some of the things I'm going to talk about, I wrote them down here just so that I'll stay on the same line. So if you see me putting my head down, I'm checking my notes, okay? Okay, so let's talk about order and why I feel that order is important. So first of all, I would make you to understand my context of order so that at least we can be on the same page. Here is the question. It begs the question. And here's the question. A lot of people have everything they need to make the most out of their lives, to become who God has ordained them to be, to become the version of themselves that they're proud of. However, their current reality is nothing like what they hope for. Now, for that, a lot of people would believe that there is something missing. Yes, of course, there is something missing, but not in the way you're looking at it. A lot of people look at it in the sense that there is something missing. Hence, I need to add something else. I need to find something else. I need to look for something else. That might be right for some people. But for the kind of people I would like to speak with today, that is not your problem. Your problem is not that you don't have all it takes to become who you're supposed to be. Your problem is not that you don't have all the materials and all the recipe to cook something delicious for the world to enjoy. The problem is that you are combining and mixing the things you have in the wrong order. And sometimes that's the work of the accuser. You see, sometimes when the accuser works and ensures and finds out that there is nothing they can do, we've gotten everything we need to get, their next strategy is confusion. Now, if we go all the way back, we begin to see what the work of the accuser looks like. Let's go back to the book of Genesis chapter 1 verse 1. The Bible says that in the beginning when God began the creation of the heavens and the earth, there was a certain state in which the earth was because there has been a reign of accusation upon the earth and its dominion. The earth was in a state of darkness, it was void and it was formless. Now, these are the states that accusation brings to people. I don't want to sound overly religious, that's why I'm using the term accusation. So when you have everything you need to become all you're supposed to be, but you are not becoming that, there's a very high chance that you are being plagued with darkness, formlessness, or there is so much of void. That sensation of void. And so that is the lack of order. Okay? Order is what you need. You actually need to sit down and have a rethink of the things that you have, the talents, the processes, the skills, the potentials. And when you really do sit down, you get to realize that you actually do have everything you need. Or as a matter of fact, everything you've been through, everything you've gone through has prepared you to become who you're supposed to be. And so that is where order really comes in. And it's quite important that I bring this introduction just so that we can all have the same context and, we'll be on the same page. So let's just go diving right into it and understand how this makes sense and how we can make sense of all of this all together. Now, I said that the core and the theme and the crux of what we're going to talk about today is about how you can have all the right ingredients in life, but you are not getting the right product. You're not getting to the right result, to the right end. And that is a lack of order, not a lack of ingredient, a lack of purpose, identity, and what have you. So, how do we ensure that we know that the pieces, the experiences, and the challenges that we've been through in our lives are able to become rising stones, stepping stones, instead of we seeing them as stumbling blocks? This is what order does, and this is what order affords you. Okay, now, so what are some of the things that order comprises of? And these are the things that you should take out of the session today. Number one, in order to begin to think in terms of order, you need to begin to think in terms of structure. What is the structure of your life? What are the important pieces? Your personalities, your skill, your life experience, the promises, the prophecies, the revelation, the sense of destiny. Can you bring these things together and see how they actually connect to tell the story of your life? Sometimes many of you had to go through some unpalatable circumstances and go through some debilitating situations. But when you really do put them all together, you realize that they really do have a part to play in you becoming a wholesome version of yourself. Okay, so structure is important, and that's the first thing you need to begin to seek. Bring all the parts, bring all the pieces, and try to put them all together and see if it makes sense as we begin to go on with this. Now, the second area that you need to begin to think of is with regards to arrangement. Now, when I'm talking about arrangement, now you can look at it in terms of stages of life. If you go through your life and internalize and look at your life like you were rewinding a movie, can you categorically be able to express the different stages of life you had been through? The stage where you had nothing, the stage where you felt you were alone and lonely, the stage where you continued to pray and it looked like your prayers were not being answered, the stage of silence where it felt like God was forsaking you, and the stage where you might not even realize it, but some of the things you used to pray for, now you have them. The stage where you almost failed, but favor stood out for you. The stage where men and women and people went out of their way to be of assistance to you. The stage where the necessary information you needed for life came to you. Can you actually begin to map out your life and begin to tell those stages? You see, you will not be able to make real sense of your life if you cannot put together the structures and the arrangement, the stages of your life. Now, no one can do this for you, or should I say no one should do this for you. This is actually something you're supposed to sit down with and try to put together. Because you really have to ask yourself a question. Many of us live our lives hoping and expecting that someone out of nowhere will come to make all of the meaning for us. That's wrong. I know Jesus has come and gone and is coming back. I know there's government there and all of that. But you might have armed yourself with the wrong things, expecting that your salvation, your deliverance, your destiny will come from external. Actually, you need to understand that it comes from internal. And that's why this regiment and this session is very important. This session will help you to really sit back and audit your life. Think about your life, your processes, the time you had to move locations, the time when everyone around you seemed to be moving ahead in life so fast. Can you sit down and map those processes together? Sometimes you actually need to take pens and paper and begin to sit down, meditate, and begin to write things down. So will you be able to conceptualize the structures of your life and then the arrangements of the structures, how you are who you are now based off of the phases and the stages of life you've had to go through? The third thing you need to begin to think about are priorities. And by priorities, I would term them as foundations. Now, based off of where you are now, what you're doing now, what is your priority? Now, you can miss the order of things if your priority is wrong. I'll give you an example. There are different, once you've gone to the previous stage, which is the stages and the phases of life, it helps you understand what priorities are. And before you can make priority of what the priority is in this time, you actually need to have the experience of priorities. And what the experience of priorities does for you is for you to be able to understand what the priorities of each of the stages of life were, and were you aware of those priorities. For example, it might be a certain time in your life where you need to begin to amass resources and build wealth. That would be a priority. It might be a priority in the phase of life where it's to make friends and connect with people. It might be a priority in life that you're growing and you have so much baggage that you need to sit down, heal from your trauma, disconnect from the people who are no longer visible in your future, and close those doors. That can be a priority. It can be a priority to spend a long time praying, meditating, and seeking the face of God, because there's so much voices out there and you need a sense of pure clarity and instructions of what the next phase should be. That can be a priority. Priority could be, I need to increase in my career, and in the next 5 years I need to get to so and such level in my career. That's a priority. Now the issue now is that a lot of people are at a phase where there is a confusion of priorities and they don't really know what to do. Now there are two ways to this. It's either because you missed a phase in life, and so the things and the exams you needed to pass are in those stages are being carried over to now. So it actually does look like you are having to do so much and a lot because you missed certain classes. Also, it could be because you are still confused at the priority of the stage and you don't even know what to let go. So these are things that you really have to sit down and ponder on and get a sense of clarity for yourself. Now, the fourth area to now begin to think of is in the present. Now, how do you make do of this? What is going to be the effective mix? Now, you need to understand this. You will not really get that inspiration or the clarity of what the effective mix for you is supposed to be if you have not done this previous sit-down, meditative, and thinking processes. And so that's the reason why this is the last thing you're supposed to do. Okay? So I've talked about structure. I've talked about arrangement. We talked about the stages and the seasons of life. I've talked about priorities, which are foundations. What are the pièces de résistance, the irresistible pieces, the most important things you're supposed to focus on. And then now is how do you mix all of these things together? Now, if you're supposed to prepare custard, and what are the things you need? Okay, you need the custard powder, you need water, you need a pot or a bowl, and then you need heat to put it all together. Now you need to understand that in order to make good custard, there is a particular way to order those processes. And to the best of my understanding, you can first dilute the custard, not make it too diluted, just so that there are no lumps into it. And then you begin to pour hot water into it and then begin to mix until you get that thick stage. Or for some people, they begin to heat the water, a little amount of water, and then they begin to pour the custard that has been diluted into the water and begin to mix it until it thickens up. In those situations, we both got to the destination of the properly prepared custard. But do you know that with this same mix, if someone brings the powdery custard and begins to heat up the powdery custard until it becomes black, and then you add that into the water, do you know that that's not going to give you custard? That is how a lot of people have lived their lives. They've made certain mistakes that has created lots of problems for them because they did not understand the right order. One of the ways to understand the order is what is the end result supposed to look like? What are the things you currently have with you? How can you mix those things in a careful way to ensure that you get the final result? Now, it is this thinking process that a lot of people do not have the time to do. And so they're living life on autopilot. They're living life on cruise control. They're living life on default. Or they have just given someone else the authority to combine their lives together in such a way that it does not make sense anymore. All right. So, like I wrote here, in order to make the best thing out of life, you have to follow the right order. One of the things to also help you make sense of all of these things is that we always need to start from the beginning. When God was trying to create the heavens and the earth, you would see He followed a certain order. Okay, and that's why order is very important. From the first day all the way to the sixth day and the seventh day when He rested, there was order. He did not create the man on the first day because man needed food, man needed assignment, man needed atmosphere, man needed purpose. Now all of those things needed to have been created first before the man appeared. The same thing with you. Your purpose, your destiny, your fulfillment, before it can get to that point of maturity, there needs to be processes and order. So, first and foremost, you start with the beginning, like I wrote here. You start with substance. Now, substance minus order gives darkness. Substance minus order gives darkness. When you have that sense of destiny in you, but you don't have that awareness of its order, it will create darkness. Okay? Now, one of the things that you also need to understand in the creation process is that we did not have order, we had chaos. The Bible said, in the beginning, when God began the creations of the heavens and the earth was without form, void, and there was darkness over the face of the deep. That was a chaotic season when we did not have order. Now, when there was a need for order, what did God do? The next thing followed through says, and then the Spirit of God began to move over the face of the deep. A lot of people are too quick to conclude with the scripture, and it's important to establish something right. The presence of the Spirit does not create order. It is the movement of the Spirit that creates order. What that means is that the presence of revelation in your life, the awareness of prophecies and promises will not create order. It is when there begins an internal movement within you, that's when those pieces begin to make sense. So it's very important. So the Spirit presence doesn't bring order. Revelation and purpose doesn't create change in your life. It is when there is a movement. Now the Spirit is necessary for the movement, but the Spirit without the movement of the Spirit will just create a whole lot more confusion. And there are many people in that state when they have a sense of what they're supposed to become, but they don't know how to go about it. They don't know what to do. They don't know what the next step is. That is because there is no movement in their lives. Even though they've caught the Spirit, they've caught the prophecies, they have the promises, and what have you. Now, you also need to understand that change begins from within. I've said this before. And how does that change move? And so this is the order in which I'm going to talk through it. It starts from the Spirit, and then it goes to the unseen, then it goes to the intangible, then it goes to the atomic before it becomes physical. I say that again. From the spiritual to the unseen, to the intangible, to the atomic before physical. Sometimes people say spiritual, not unseen. Yes, a part of the quality of what makes something spiritual is that it is unseen. But not all things that are unseen are spiritual. Air particles cannot be seen. Does that make them spiritual? No. So you get my drift. So where does the Spirit comes in? Now, all the things that must be made must first be created. The spiritual is the plane of creation. And more importantly, you really don't have a lot of part to play in this spiritual, in this creation of the spiritual. God does that. It is the revelation of what has been created that you need. Jesus has done it all, the finished work, okay? So it is that which is the epitome of the creations of God. So whenever you want to understand what the spiritual holds, you go to Jesus, because it's the revelation of God, and the totality of the revelation of God in the physical sense is Jesus. So it's the one you go to get the spiritual insight. And the next is the unseen. Now, the unseen talks about the chaotic forces, especially the forces you do not have control over. For example, God created atmosphere before he created seed, because he knows that the seed will need the atmosphere. God called the ground to come forth first before he created plants, because he knew that the plants would need a ground to stay. But the moment the plants came and the seeds came, the seeds did not command the atmosphere, but the atmosphere influenced the seed. The seed could not control what happened to the atmosphere, but the atmosphere controlled how the seed came out. Okay, so that is the same thing as the unseen. These are sometimes chaotic. I use the term chaotic because we do not have control over them. Now, we don't have control over them doesn't mean that they cannot be used to advantage. We don't have control over gravity. It can work for advantage. We don't have control over the movement of the wind and the tides of the oceans, but it can work to advantage. You get my drift? So, some of these unseen things, your goal is how can these things work in my advantage? So that is the task for you that you need to begin. So you are in a government, you are in a nation. There are unseen forces you cannot control, like governmental policies. You can't control them, but how can they work for you? There are business economic systems. There are personal economies. There are wars and rumors of wars. There are earthquakes. These are things you cannot control. There is movement of people. There is cultural drift. These are things you cannot control. How can you maximize it for your business, for your product, for your future? So this is how you need to begin to think in terms of order. Order doesn't mean that you just sit down and everything works for you. No, you have to begin to know how to work the things around you in such a way that it plays to your advantage. Okay, so that takes care of the unseen. Then we have the intangible. Now, the intangible refers to the ethical, so the areas of characters, emotional, value systems, the things that we actually have control over. So you don't have control over the unseen, but you have control over the intangible. It is how much control of the intangible you have that direct how you would navigate through the unseen. So how do you manage your emotions? How do you manage your character? How do you manage ethical matters? What are your core values? Okay, these are some of the things that will determine how the position of your business is going to be. This is what will tell you how well you're going to thrive in the land, wherever you find yourself. And so you need to sit down and find the specifics of these things. What are the unseen forces that control my life that I'm unaware of? Governmental influences, technological influences, the state of the nation I'm at, the state of my family, hereditary things. These are things you can't control. But how can you use the intangibles to influence the unseen? That is one of the questions you need to ask yourself, and it's one of the things that will take you out of a lot of problems that you came into and there was nothing you could do about it. It's what creates a shield around you. Okay, so from the intangible, then we go into the atomic. Now, the atomic is just a fancy way. It actually does mean that the architectural operating principles, sometimes slightly different from things like core values and all, principles are what you hold on to. Are you disciplined? Do you show courage? Do you stand up for people? What is the thing that people will know you for? The principles you stand by. People have no idea. A lot of people don't even know what the principles are. And that's why there's a lot of work you have to do in discovering yourself, to sit down and find out what are these things. I failed in this stage of life. Why? Not everything is demonic. Yes, I know that there are unseen forces and all of that. But if you have strong intangibles and strong atomic, you stand a great chance against the unseen. That's one of the things you don't understand. Okay? So think about those things. And then it's your principles, the architectural, your mentalities that now determine what life gives to you. And so those are some of the core things that I just want you to become aware of, in this session. So even though this is a mentoring session, so the best I can do is just to give you information, and then it's left to you what you do with it. For example, last month during a coaching session, when I was taking people through some of these things, you get to understand a lot of people don't understand their lives. They live their lives so oblivious of themselves. And these are some of the things. Order is one of the things you actually need in life to bring you to that state of awareness and give you a bit of control about how your life will pan out. It is some of these things that will let you know whether you're supposed to stay in a country or leave a country without being sentimental. A lot of people who are in Nigeria now have no business being in Nigeria because they actually are useful to Nigeria outside of Nigeria. Okay, and some people who have traveled out of Nigeria shouldn't even have any business traveling out because they serve more purpose being in Nigeria as an aid to a certain system that needs to be created. But you can't know all these things if you are moving only by the unseen forces. Economic situation is hard, so I have to travel out. Says who? Why must you travel out? And in order to be able to answer that question in a state of order and tranquility, you have to know all these things that I've mentioned. Okay, and so take some time out to really think, rediscover yourself, and know what you're supposed to be doing. And this is just an effort to help in that particular way. If you've got questions or concerns, you can ask in the comment section, or for those who are in my coaching group, obviously you have access to me for that. The goal of this is to ensure that someone needs this. You've been going through circles and praying to God and hoping for things to happen. Meanwhile, God has put everything in order, but you are doing them in the wrong mix. And God is not going to do anything. God has given you the instruction. The instruction is in your heart. There are laws and commandments in your heart. There are scriptures that should guide you. And you need to find some of these things, okay? All right, so that's how long I'm going to take. I don't like to take too long a session here. I just believe that this has been of a lot of value to you. If it has not, it probably means that you're not ripe enough to have this. And someday, sometime, all of this will make a lot of sense to you. All right, then. So till we get to see you again, make the very best part out of your life. The world is becoming more dark, becoming more disrupted, and it is people who have a sense of order within that would be like an anchor, that even though there are waves and floods and wind going through, because they are anchored straight, the cacophony of the external will not influence them. And actually, they'll begin to grow in influence because internally they are ordered, and then that order can begin to influence the world. That is what I want for you. And the time to begin to do that is now. It's actually already late to start, but it's better to start than to never start at all. All right? I wish you all the best, and I hope we'll get to see you again in the next session. God bless.